basically that is in effect a declaration of war. So when I saw that, I knew, oh my God, this guy he's gone full Tonto, is what the British Defence Minister said. He's not balanced.
SAR Experience.
Привет from Chernovtsi, and today's video is going to be a short one. It is the 24th of February 2022, and Russia at 5 a.m. this morning invaded Ukraine again. It looks like a full invasion. I'm in Chernovtsi, I'm near to the Romanian border, and I'd already written out some thoughts for today's video yesterday, and I thought I would film it as why President Putin is going to invade Ukraine. But in fact, I realized when I saw Ukrainian President Zelensky's speech late last night, pleading in Russian to Russians to stop President Putin from invading Ukraine, which occurred this morning along with, it seems, President Lukashenko of Belarus. From the information I have, I realized that, well, I'm probably not going to get this one filmed before it actually happens, and that's what happened this morning. I did hold out hope that wouldn't be the case. So the reason I want to make this video is to kind of deal with the disinformation, especially from those useful idiots of the Putin regime who spread all this disinformation on the internet as to why he's doing this, and himself. I mean, this morning, the reason that I read, at least briefly, was he's claiming there was going to be a denazification here, that Ukraine is some sort of Nazi state, and that there would be more freedom. All this codswallop. This country has a president who is native Russian-speaking, Jewish, whose grandparents fought in the Second World War against the Nazis, who has family members who died in the Holocaust. He was democratically led in a free and fair election against an incumbent. You know, change of power. When have you ever seen that in Russia? Anyways, President Putin actually said the truth about why he's doing it in his speech about 2 nights ago. Actually, I had just finished filming the last video that I put up last night when the news of this address to the nation was going to take place. And I watched that, and it was very scary. He was extremely menacing, caustic, bitter sounding throughout it. He rambled on, and in fact, he laid out exactly why he is invading. And I'm going to quote him in his own words. I'm just going to sit down for a minute, and I'm going to read out the official English language transcript of his speech that is on the Kremlin's website. So there's no, doubt about interpretation at the time or what I think. You can go and you can read yourself. I'm going to put it down below anyways as a link. I'm going to read out a few passages of it, and it's going to illustrate exactly why this is taking place. This outrage, this gross violation of international law, and something that Europeans in general have not had to deal with, at least since the Balkans Wars in the 90s, and maybe on this scale, because this is only the first day of the attacks in this country, the new attacks. Obviously, it's been a war since 2014 with Russia, since the annexation of Crimea and the war in Donbass started, but it could be the biggest war since the Second World War, and I want you to be very clear about the reasons why it's taking place. And when you see useful idiots of the regime parrot what is not true, because President Putin said it in his own words exactly why this is taking place. So hold on a sec. Let's sit down together.
SAR Experience.
Okay, so I'm going to read the official translation off the Kremlin's website now. Just a few paragraphs that basically outline it too. You can, of course, go and read the whole thing afterwards. I'll put the link there. I would like to emphasize again that Ukraine is not just a neighboring country for us. It is an inalienable part of our history, culture, and spiritual place. These are comrades, those dearest to us, not only colleagues, friends, and people who once served together, but also relatives, people bound by blood, by family ties. So the key word there, it is an inalienable part of our history, culture, and spiritual space. So basically he's saying that inalienable means that you cannot leave. It cannot be given away, right? You cannot change that. You must be in Russia's sphere of influence. I could probably stop the video there, because that's the reason why he's invading. And if I made a video 6 weeks ago in Kharkiv where I outlined the roots of the conflict, which are that basically Ukraine wants to leave Russia's sphere of influence. It doesn't want to be part of its economic pact, the Eurasian Economic Union. Instead, it wants to be part of the European Union, right, with the Western European countries and the Central European countries. And also, it doesn't want to be part of the CSTO, which is the Russia-led security pact, wants to be part of NATO, which is obviously the American and Western and Central European security pact. So what Ukraine is trying to do is leave Russia's sphere of influence, and the main reason for that is the promise of prosperity. Countries that did that before, like Poland and the Baltic states, they now have GDP per capita that are 4 times Ukraine. In fact, twice double that of Russia, right? So, they want that prosperity primarily, and what President Putin says that they are not even allowed to choose, which means he doesn't think they're entitled to be an independent country and make their own choices, right? So that is probably just, as I said, I could almost end it, but we'll go on because there's some other important stuff. So I will start with the fact that modern Ukraine was entirely created by Russia, or to be precise, by Bolshevik Communist Russia. This process started practically right after the 1917 revolution, and Lenin and his associates did it in a way that was extremely harsh on Russia. By severing what is historically Russian land, nobody asked the millions of people living there what they thought. So there he's saying basically the borders of modern Ukraine, which were delineated during the Soviet Union, and actually they were changed again afterwards, with Crimea being added after 1917 to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. They are not legitimate. That's what he's saying. So first of all, he said, country's not entitled to independence if it wants to leave Russia's orbit, and its borders are not legitimate. So 2014, Russia annexed Crimea, changed its borders, illegal under international law. Then into also the war site in Donbass, and actually just after he gave this speech, he recognized, he says, a change in borders by recognizing the Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republics, again undermines the borders of Ukraine. Not that that's going to be internationally recognized anytime soon. So another important key paragraph here, essentially the so-called pro-Western civilizational choice made by the oligarchic Ukrainian authorities was not and is not aimed at creating better conditions in the interests of people's well-being, but at keeping the billions of dollars that the oligarchs have stolen from the Ukrainians and are holding in their accounts in Western banks, while reverently accommodating the geopolitical rivals of Russia. So he's saying that they are basically traitors. If you take the first one, they're not entitled to be independent. Their borders are up for grabs. Now he's accusing them almost of treason because they're reverently becoming the geopolitical rivals of Russia, right? So another key paragraph. He goes on for so long in this mumbling, and he only gets to NATO, which is normally the main reason given by people who are Putin apologists or appeasers. He's only worried about NATO moving eastwards, encroaching on Russia's security. Well, let's see exactly, he's getting to 2/3 of the speech. He hasn't even mentioned them. It's almost an afterthought at this stage about NATO because already they're not allowed to be independent. So the reason to join NATO from Ukraine's point of view is, well, they want to leave Russia's sphere of influence economically and politically. How do you do that if he's saying you're not allowed to? Well, you need to be able to deter a military intervention like we saw this morning, or since 2014. And you either have a big military, nuclear weapons, which actually Ukraine gave up in 1994, the Budapest Memorandum, which Russia signed to respect Ukraine's sovereignty, which obviously they haven't. Or you join an alliance that is able to protect you. And in this case, that is NATO. That's what they believe. Like the Baltic states are part of it for that reason as well. They perceive that Russia would try to behave the same way with them otherwise. So when he gets to NATO, about 2/3 of the way through his very long-winded, meandering, caustic speech. So he reiterates a claim, which is not really founded, because he quotes it out of context about that NATO promised they wouldn't expand. They promised the Soviet leadership. They never actually promised Russia, and there's no treaty. But he repeats that. The United States promised the Soviet leadership that NATO jurisdiction or military presence would not expand 1 inch to the east, and that the unification of Germany will not lead to the spread of NATO's military organization to the east. This is a quote, but I quoted out of context, right? So another justification. It is a NATO one, but it comes almost as an afterthought towards the end. Today, one glance at the map is enough to see to what extent Western countries have kept their promise to refrain from NATO's eastward expansion. They just cheated. See how bitter that tone is. We have seen 5 waves of NATO expansion, one after the other. So then he goes into the waves of expansion. Countries like Latvia, Lithuania, Poland joining it. And then he talks about missiles being nearby. which, you know, could be resolved with a treaty and whatnot between Russia and, I guess, NATO or the US. Finally, after the US destroyed the INF Treaty, the Pentagon has openly developing many land-based attack weapons, including ballistic missiles that are capable of hitting targets at a distance of up to 5,500 kilometers. If deployed in Ukraine, such systems will be able to hit targets in Russia's entire European part. The flying time of Tomahawk cruise missiles to Moscow will be less than 35 minutes. Ballistic missiles from Kharkov, mentioned the city Kharkiv in Ukrainian transliteration, which was attacked this morning, will take 7 to 8 minutes, and hypersonic assault weapons 4 to 5 minutes. It is like a knife to the throat. I have no doubt that they hope to carry out these plans, as they did many times in the past. NATO has never actually attacked directly Russia or the Soviet Union, but let's go past. Expanding NATO eastwards, moving their military infrastructure to Russian borders, and fully ignoring our concerns, protests, and warning. Excuse me, but they simply do not care about such things, and they did whatever they deemed necessary. That can already be put in other parts of NATO. You can put it in, you know, Latvia, Estonia. It wouldn't be that much further. Okay, if they also put them in Ukraine, but they haven't put any of these missiles here. That's not happened, right? And they've never attacked Russia or the Soviet Union. So again, just a very empty justification, and it's an afterthought. It's coming towards the end. Okay, so this is the final part. How long can this tragedy continue? How much longer can one put up with this? Russia has done everything to preserve Ukraine's territorial integrity. They already violated not just international law in general, but obviously the Budapest Memorandum of 1994, when Ukraine gave up its nuclear missiles in order for an extra security guarantee that Russia wouldn't invade them and change their borders, which is done. So that's just a bull-faced lie. Even if you agree with the annexation, they did not preserve Ukraine's territorial integrity. But remember the second paragraph, he says the borders aren't legitimate anyways. So I guess that's, if you think like that, then anything is possible. All these years it has persistently and patiently pushed for the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 2202 of February 17, 2015, which consolidated the Minsk package of measures of February 12, 2015 to settle the situation in Donbass. Donbass is the eastern part of Ukraine where there has been a war, low-level intensity conflict. Well, 14,000 people approximately have already died there since 2014. So he says Minsk agreement, they weren't implementing. Now the dispute there, and I put in another video, was the fact that Ukraine says it should be interpreted this way, which is basically like Russia doesn't get a veto over its foreign policy. It can still join the European Union or NATO or whatever, but give some limited autonomy to those regions. Well, Russia says no, they have to have a veto. We get to stop you leaving our sphere of influence, right? That's what the debate is about. In this regard, I consider it necessary to take a long overdue decision and to immediately recognize the independence and sovereignty of Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic. So afterwards he signed it. I mean, who knows, he probably already signed it and recorded it maybe, but anyways, it happened after this was published officially. This is the important final paragraph of his speech. We want those who seized and continue to hold power in Kiev to immediately stop hostilities. Who is he talking about? Because there was a democratic election. Zelensky didn't seize power in, I'm assuming he's referring to 2014 when Viktor Yanukovych was overthrown, or he left, or a coup, depending on how you want to describe it. But anyways, he left and was replaced by interim president Petro Poroshenko won an election. And then subsequently in 2019, the current president, Zelensky, he won with 75% of the vote. The election became the new president. So that doesn't make any sense to me. It's like almost saying that Zelensky is irrelevant, I think. Otherwise, the responsibility for the possible continuation of the bloodshed will lie entirely on the conscience of Ukraine's ruling elite. So he's saying, you either surrender, stop hostilities, you basically give up because you're not allowed to respond to us, right? Stop hostilities. Otherwise, you'll be responsible for the possible continuation of the bloodshed, and it will be entirely on your conscience. So basically what he's saying is, you either surrender or we attack you. That is a declaration of war. Now, legally speaking, we don't have declarations of war almost ever anymore since the Second World War. So a legal reason for that, that's not so relevant to explain, but basically that is in effect a declaration of war. So when I saw that, I knew, oh my God, this guy he's gone full Tonto, is what the British Defence Minister said. He's not balanced. And you could see that over the last few months. I was thinking, is this brinkmanship? because maybe he's just a very good actor, or has he lost it a bit? So very bitter speech, something you never saw really, I really ever saw with him. He looked agitated all the time. And basically he's saying, this is a declaration of war. You have a choice, you surrender or we attack you. And the reasons is that he thinks that Ukraine inevitably belongs to Russia's sphere of influence, so it can only exist in Russia's orbit. That was the first paragraph. So it's not allowed to even aspire to join the European Union or NATO, right? It's not even allowed. Maybe at best you could call Finlandization, which I explained also in the first video. I'll put all these videos down below in the description up in the cards. And yeah, Ukraine's borders are an artificial construction. Where isn't on the great European plain that runs all the way from Russia to Amsterdam? Well, basically, all artificial constructions of some sort. So he doesn't recognize their borders. He doesn't think they're allowed to do it. They're not independent. He thinks they'd be better off economically also in Russia's orbit, which is the premise on which they're trying to leave, promise of prosperity by joining the European Union, being protected by NATO because they don't have a strong enough military and they don't have nuclear weapons to protect themselves. Only gets to join NATO, yeah, he only gets to NATO as an afterthought, which is normally the main thing that the Putin apologists or the appeasers talk about. They talk about, you know, if you just sign that Ukraine can't join NATO, then, you know, you can come back with your white piece of paper like Neville Chamberlain in 1938 in Munich and say, peace in our time. Well, he's already outlined that they're not independent and their borders are up for grabs. And they have to stay in Russia's sphere, both economically, and they would be better off. So do you think if NATO didn't exist and Ukraine said, well, we're going to join the EU, we want to do a different path, we want to be independent, you think he wouldn't invade? Well, ipso facto, he already has, again. He already had anyways in 2014. So yeah, never mind the fact that NATO membership is a long way off. And also, you know, he's talking about the border moving and the border, you know, the borders coming up to Russia's borders, the borders with the NATO countries. But if he goes this way to the west, the border is also going to be beside each other. It's just going to be further away from Moscow, which is what he wants. He also in it makes up his genocide claim, which he's been repeating. I said that in the last video. There's no evidence for genocide going on in Donbass. I actually lost count of all the you know, very dubious casus belli, which are reasons for war that were going around. It just seemed they were going for quantity over quality, and he repeated that, you know, this morning with this denazification. I don't think he cares really. He just says whatever he wants now. He's just going to invade because he doesn't respect their independence. That is the key thing. And yeah, his decision to recognize Luhansk and Donetsk effectively declares war in that final paragraph. So yeah, he's gone full tanto. That's just the bottom line. And I want you to, you know, this is a short video to say. I would have made it longer, I guess, if I had more time, so that you understand exactly the reasons that he's doing it. And when you hear an apologist for him or a useful idiot who's just parroting his propaganda, you go back and you read the words of Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, in that nasty tone that he had, and you will be able to verify for yourself the real reason. So I'm going to do a live stream in about an hour's time after I film this. Obviously you'll see this video later because it'll be edited up on the channel. Just going to do a short one here in Cherniv, and I'm close to the Romanian border. And you know, I feel sorry also not just for Ukrainians. Obviously this is tragic, it's outrageous, it's reprehensible what has happened so far, and it's probably going to get a lot worse. I also feel bad for Belarusian people and Russian people, you know, having this kind of president or presidents like they have, who seem to live in a different era. I remember my friend had another video back in Mykolaiv, you know, off camera. She said to me, you know, but this is the 21st century, Connor. I mean, people can't behave like this anymore. And I said, I'm not so sure that he agrees with you, Vladimir Putin. And this morning we got our answer. So my support goes out to the people of Ukraine. Slava Ukraina, Heroyam Slava. I'll see you in the next video.
SAR Experience.